Okay. I will call the Town of Southbury Board of Selectmen Special Public Forum to order. Oh, look at that. Is it recording?
Yeah, the live stream is.
But you should be recording on that, right?
It is. It's recording now.
Okay. Is it streaming also?
Yes.
Okay. Are you monitoring the streaming?
Yes.
Thank you. At 7, what is this? 7:01. We're a minute late. So if we could have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so the purpose of this forum is to receive questions and comments from the public regarding police services and police services study committee report. So, if there is any public comment, the Board of Selectmen and those in the committee are here, most of us are here, to try and answer those questions should you have any. So, it's a nice crowd here. Welcome, everybody. How are you? Is there any public comment? Anybody would like to? Please, if you'd state your name. Stole a pen.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ken Corsu. I'm a former selectman in the town of Southbury. Was very honored and pleased to serve in that position, even though it was for only one term. My questions for the panel tonight is, why doesn't the police department publish its record of arrests and activities on a regular basis like every other town does? It's the only town in the area that doesn't publish anything. So how do we know what our police officers do on any day of the week? Because there's no reports. Even when I was a selectman, we didn't get any reports. That's number one. I got 3 minutes?
No. No 3 minutes here, Ken,
Okay, number two,
but not 3 hours.
how does the town determine how many police officers it should have? When I was on the Board of Selectmen, we said, oh, we can have more police officers, but there was never a report on what they do, an arrest or anything else. And, well, other towns like us have this many police officers. To me, that's not the answer. You justify the number of police officers in the town based on the needs and activities that go on. You know, we had the bank robbed a couple of times right across the street from the police department, and those guys got away. And so I'm very curious, statistically, how do you determine how many police officers you should have? And if you can tell me this is how many we need and why, I'm okay with that. But I don't know if we have the right number now. And I know we have more now than we did 10 years ago.
Thank you, John.
And I know some of the police officers. I think they're fine people and do a good job, but, you know, I think the purpose is to protect the public and to deal with crime. You know, there's more theft going on in town now, and if we don't have any reports, we don't know how they address those issues. Anyway, I'd like some answers to these questions if we can tonight. Thank you. And I'm not against having an independent police department. It's just, what do you have, why do you have it, and where are you going? Thank you.
Chris, do you have some of the answers on that?
Yeah, I'll start by addressing the publishing of police reports. First of all, thank you, Mr. Corso, for the questions. Publishing the police reports, anytime we have a criminal or motor vehicle case, we will submit a news release. And what that is it's a document that the newspapers or social media or any online publications can pick up. So we don't specifically put that in the paper. It's the paper's responsibility what they want to publish. But after each case, we will submit a synopsis of the case investigation. We try, just through transparency, to post as much as we can on social media. However, we're limited there too, just for a lot of criminal investigations. If we have an ongoing investigation, sometimes we don't want to put out too much information to tip off, what information we may or may not have. And that's in regard to the case reports. In response to the bank robbery, it may not have been published, but we did solve that bank robbery. There was 3 people that were arrested. They were involved in multiple banks, referring to the Ion Bank robbery. Again, there was some time lapse during the investigation from when the bank was originally robbed and when the arrests were made. So that sometimes gets lost in the media because it's not, the newest news. It's, could be several months old, could be, 6, 8 months old. So sometimes it does get pushed to the back and it's not, current events. As far as the police, maybe someone from the Board of Selectmen would speak on the,
So,
I could speak on it unless someone from the Board of Selectmen rather.
the number of police is determined, first off, in our budget, if we have it in our budget. But there are, depending on what patrols are needed, coverage needed, and there's an idea of with vacations and illnesses and workman's comp, what's a number that we can operate with, especially like now we've added the detective's position, and we are about to go to 25 on the roster. You have anything to add to that, Chris? I think that's a Board of Selectmen answer of how that's determined.
Right. Mr. Corso, were you referring to more to the number of police officers we have? Just so we can answer it clearly.
Yes, it's not a budgetary answer. It's driven by the needs of the town based on what you guys think we should have, crimes, crime prevention, protecting the elderly, traffic stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to justify.
Correct.
It's never been presented, as far as I know, to the Board of Selectmen. This is what we need and why.
So do you want me to answer it, or?
I can speak to that, Ken, sorry, just from the budgetary standpoint, when Chris comes in the budget meetings, when we do our budget meetings, I think it's in January, Chris and usually the resident trooper comes and they do present usually the crime statistics for the town that the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance do look at when they determine the budget figures for the police department.
Any other?
I'll just add to that. Throughout the budget process, each year I've been on the board, so I've been through 8 budget cycles now. Yeah, okay. Each time the police have come to us asking for more police officers, they've come to us with data and statistics and rationale for that. And most recently, correct me if I'm wrong, when we added the 25th officer, I believe that was also in part due to the police accountability bill and certain additional reporting requirements and responsibilities needed in the department, and determined that there was the need there for that additional reason as well. So.
And we added the position of detective was part of it. So they do give a justification for the number. Is there anybody else? Ma'am?
We spoke previously. You remember me, I'm sure. My name is Ellen Kratzer, and my son is the proprietor of Lake Wine and Spirits, which is a liquor store right across from CVS, and the liquor store right across from CVS. I don't know if it was in December, but our store was broken into in the middle of the night. Our front door was crashed, and we had to purchase another one. And they took Red Bull and cigarettes, which is, black market, kind of what they look for before the alarm sent cops over. After that, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after that, I spoke with Jeff because I wanted to know what was going on. When we purchased the store 6 years ago, it was safe. We never had any problems. I never heard of any crime, or we wouldn't have purchased it. And I still want some statistics as of 2.5 years ago and going further back, because the increase is tremendous. I think people need to know that. So we also had another situation where we had a woman, transgendered individual, come in with a very large bag, and she was taking very expensive champagne, this was before New Year's, and liquor off the shelves and putting them into her bag. The employee at the store did not notice this. Once they were gone, we noticed it, and called the police, and when they looked at the video, they could see that in the back of their car was an ATM machine. So they had already, broken in somewhere else and taken an ATM machine. Maybe that was the first people. But anyway, she left, or he, and 2 weeks later, she came back. And that really scared me. She came back. My husband was keeping an eye out. He noticed that she parked down by the hardware store, so he went down the steps and he was going to take a picture of the license plate. Personally, I wouldn't have done that because anything could happen. There was another person in the car started screaming horrible things at him, transphobe, racist, all this other stuff. And, we're going to kick your butt or whatever, and then they drove away. That really scared me, because on Facebook, Southbury Police Department, they had posted a picture of this individual, and the remarks were so negative about our store. What do you care? You have insurance. What do you care? What are you putting your high-priced items so low on the shelf? Excuse me, stealing is stealing. Don't tell me where to put our items. I mean, they're trying to make right of this total wrong. There's wrong and there's right, and that's stealing, okay? And we never heard back about that individual. Thankfully, she never came back in again. But I have not slept well since then. I also had an incident when a police officer came to my house. In the middle of the day, I almost passed out because I thought right away something happened, but he was very nice, and he said that they were stealing checks out of the mailboxes on Borough Road. And when you had your flag up, they would go and steal the check, wash it out or something, and then, obviously you have to pay the fee and blah, blah, blah. So, yep, that happened to me. I hear about a lot. Every store, as far as I know, has been hit at least once. Walgreens, CVS, the stores down by Stop and Shop, Ultra, Old Navy, all of them multiple times. And I part of me thinks people should know this because it's really important. But I don't want anyone to feel afraid, because this was such a pleasant town and very safe. When we first got here, I loved it. I walked the streets at night. It was just wonderful. And now I'm really concerned. And I don't see things as getting any better, because I know there's limits to what you could do as a police officer, and I understand that. I feel really bad for you guys, and I want to thank you for everything that you do. But if this is going to help the situation, having our own police force, then I am all for it. I don't understand any of it, because I thought we had our own police force, because it says Southbury Police. So I don't know, I'm a little confused. But, and I was happy about that. So I think as many policemen as we need right now, because things are bad right now, really bad. So I guess there's two things. I'd like some statistics as to, 6 years ago up to now. And then also I would want to hear more about how it's going to what the difference will be. I mean, from what I read, there's a state trooper, and I guess used to report into him, or they would help us, or I don't know. I don't know. But if you could explain that whole thing, that would be great.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you so much for all that you have done, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, and I will touch base with you offline so I can get you some of those statistics that you're looking for the store.
Is anybody else would like to speak? Sure, come on up. I can't see who it. Joe, come on up.
I'm Joe Ruggiero, 245 Skyview Drive. Just had a couple of comments about the effort here. I want to thank the efforts and the members of the Police Services Study Committee for their research on this topic and for looking into the various issues associated with considering an independent police force here in Southbury. Thank you. I remember the last time that this was publicly considered and discussed back in Bill Davis' administration. I also believe it was privately being entertained by Ed Edelson late in his administration, as I recall. I remember sharing my thoughts with Bill Davis when he proposed it, And I was concerned about some of the issues that might arise if we go down this path. It feels like deja vu all over again. Before I share those thoughts, let me just say the first thing I do think is that a time has come to create our own independent police force here in town. Financially, it seems to be more reasonable and not so bad, and it makes sense, I think. And I believe that the report you folks put together supports that and considers many of the salient points that are important. If people argue against cost or they say it's going to be more costly, I would also point out that in the past we had events where the state imposed certain costs upon us, like computers in police cars and things of that nature that sort of were not really in our control because we were a resident state trooper system. And I think certainly there'll be other costs, but you know, at this point, I think it's time for a change. I'm actually very curious to see how the people of the town will do when they are presented with a referendum vote. We'll find out. Compliments to you on some of the safeguards cited in preventing too much police department expansion or sprawl. I think some of the checks and balances outlined like you had in Ledyard there in the report will prevent the department from getting too big or overstaffed for its purpose. But there needs to be a balance, of course, as we're hearing from some of the folks here in town. I do feel strongly that of the three choices outlined for how the chief might report into town government, it is important that with the first one that you outlined be the choice. This is where you have the chief reporting directly to the first selectman. I don't think having the chief report to a committee makes operational logical sense, be it the Board of Selectmen or a separate police commission. Our first selectman is currently our de facto chief of police, and I think that the reporting structure is sufficient and should stay that way. Contract approval for a chief or a PD personnel would still be approved by the Board of Selectmen, as are all contracts, but operational daily reporting should be to the first selectman. I am not a supporter of a separate PD commission. As an aside, I am aware of at least one police commission that permits its commissioners to carry their own badges. I believe this to be an inappropriate trapping and not something the civilian oversight board should have or be able to flash when stopped for a traffic violation. It seems a little too cozy of a relationship. I want to point out that the contracts that are created with the chief and or other police department personnel must be very carefully structured, and how the chief and the others will perform must be able to be carefully measured. This is paramount. A poorly structured or non-existent contract or a lack of performance measurement can be a recipe for disaster. I want to cite an example. I lived in Naugatuck from 1990 to 1994. And at that time, we had a terrible experience with a chief who did not have a contract at all. He did not perform. He stayed in the role for 25 years, which was way too long, and he would not leave. It became very contentious. Lawsuits occurred, individual police commissioners were sued, huge amounts of money, town money, were wasted, and the town and its people were extremely upset, and rightfully so. I hope and suspect that much has been learned from these types of past incidents, and that the mistakes that other towns have made in the past can be learned from. I just want to point out that this needs to be considered, and that the detailed crafting of the contracts and performance measurements should be indicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Mary, you can come, and then you will be next, if that's okay. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hi. My name is Mary Corsu. I'm at 272 Old Woodbury in Southbury. I don't know if many of you know that I also work in town, and I've been here working for almost 35 years in Southbury. I work in a place where I deal with people every day, young, middle, babies, the whole 9 yards. I wanted to know what you think. We have, over the past 10 years, noticed a little bit more traffic of people coming in and looking for handouts, looking for gasoline, looking for housing, and we will help them if they have a license, let's say, for a car and the registration. And I would say 100% don't. They don't have a license for a regular license or the registration for the car that they're coming in to get gas. So over the years, it seems to be a little bit more troublesome, and I'm very curious to know that how are we now compared to 30 years ago, let's say? How, is there more crime, even though we had the state helping us with the police department? Why is that well, I guess we know why it's happening, but what are we doing to prevent that, to make the people, like this young lady here, talking about the business, how are we safe where we work in this town? So will this help it? Will this hinder it? I know someone had said that if there's a call, or you have to call Jeffrey Manville, and then you have to call the state police, so this would cut down on just one person reporting, he would be the top. So it's very confusing to me that we have this much help and we're still worried, very worried. Where we work, someone can come in and take out many, many people just like that, and then we'll get help. So it's a little bit worrisome to me where I work at this point. So just a thought and question. Thanks, Chris.
Crime in any town is, there's an ebb and flow, right? So crime rates increase, the crime rates decrease. It's dependent on the economy, it's dependent on the town, the population, current events. So today's current status of crime, I think there's a uptick in retail crimes, as we've seen in Southbury. That's just not Southbury, that's nationwide, or statewide at least, specifically. And honestly, don't know the reason specifically why there's an uptick in retail crimes, but I could make some presumptions that may contribute to it. The Police Accountability Bill recently limited law enforcement's ability to do certain things. It limited law enforcement's ability on traffic stops, what they can do as far as searching vehicles, talking to operators, asking operators or passengers for information. So it's limited police in that sense. We don't pursue people anymore. The days of pursuing vehicles is over. The risks just outweigh the benefit of pursuing people unless there's a life in immediate danger. We don't pursue people over property crimes. So this word gets out, and the criminals know that the police are not going to pursue them. So if they're right in front of us and they take off, we're going to let them go, because we don't want to risk somebody else's life or an innocent person on the road's life over property. And not to say that we don't care about property, and yes, people are insured, but they pay for that insurance, and they pay for that insurance to go up when they use it. There's a great cost associated with loss of property, even for big businesses. And that cost gets trickled down to us as the users as well. So you may not be the business owner, but you may go in that store and you may pay a little bit more because the business owner is trying to absorb the cost for some of these things. So we understand that. Again, it rises and it falls. Southbury, if you look at, and I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but if you look at the crime rate of Southbury, and I just know this from preparing the budgets, the crime rate of Southbury is low compared to a lot of Connecticut towns. I mean, we have a very safe town if you go by the crime rate. The other part of crime rate is community trust, and how does the community trust the police department? Do they trust when the police department comes out that they're going to get the best service? That doesn't mean that we always solve the crime, because unfortunately we don't. Sometimes there's just not enough evidence to tie us to the person that did it. But does the victim truly know that we're doing everything we can? And I like to think, as the police department, every time our guys go out there and our girls go out there, they are given 100%. And I think that's what makes a good police department.
Chris, if I could ask, in your opinion, would being organized or not being organized change those statistics in crimes?
I think that's a hard question to answer because of how intricate it was. I mean, the committee put together a 17-page report, and I think it was basically a summary of all the different pieces that go into it. There's not one specific piece that we can say, if we can organize the police department, we can cut down on this crime. I can tell you that operations would run much smoother. And generally, if you can, oil the machine and make it run better, you get a better product out of it.
Ma'am?
My name is Marion Wood. I live in Heritage Village. And I wanted to say, first of all, this is a wonderful report. I was impressed by the depth of the investigation and the logical reasoning that was put into it. I was struck by the information about how many officers per 1,000 people. Now, I believe that Southbury is in fact quite a safe town, but it's interesting that we have 1.3 officers per 1,000 people compared to 2.0 for similar towns and 1.7 per 1,000 for the 4 towns that were interviewed for this report. That may be the right number. It may be a budget constraint. I don't know. But in my humble opinion, I would like to see an independent, professional police force, because I believe that an independent force with a head would be able to assess what happens in our town, not looking at the budget necessarily, but looking at what's going on in our town. And I hear that the nature of crime is changing. And I think that it's going to continue to change for a number of reasons, including things like identity theft and vaping and all these kinds of things. With a professional police force, with a police chief who is in control of that, I think that that person would be able to match the skills of each officer to the kinds of crimes we experience. And we would have a smoother operation because we wouldn't have to keep going up and down and up and down. The chief would be the chief, if I read this correctly. So I'm in favor of that, and I think it would serve the future of Southbury as we evolve. I also wanted to say I come from Newtown previously. And in Newtown, every year, at least until I left 8 years ago, they produced a report detailing how many incidents per type of crime. So they would say X number of burglaries, X numbers of certain kinds of assaults, X number of murders. I would like to see that in Southbury. That's true transparency, in my opinion. And I think it would help the public understand why, for example, perhaps a police chief might say, we need another officer. And here's why. Look at the categories and look how they're changing. Perhaps there's more retail crime, but we don't know. So that's my comment, and I thank you for the opportunity to make my comments tonight.
So I think, Chris, that we have produced recently the history on a document that was available to the public. Is that correct?
Generally, every January-ish, when we get down and sit down and do the budget, we'll present the crime statistics for the year that's available. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get information just because of the 2 systems we're on, the state system and our system. So to get specific on certain things, sometimes it gets a little tricky, but the general stats and the calls for service in town we can always provide that we usually do for the budgets.
Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward and speak or question or ask? Mr. Harrison? Oh, I'm sorry. You don't have to arm wrestle for it.
Funny. Name is Jim Blydner, I live at 52 Library Road. And I hadn't really planned to speak tonight, but after listening, I think I got a little perspective on it as well. I first came to Southbury in January of 1977 at the then new barracks, Troop A over here, and I was a trooper at that time. I retired out of Troop A as a detective major crime. And I've known a lot of Southbury guys over the years. And Chris goes way back. And I can say this much, there's certain intangibles here. No denigration of the state police, they're great people, but they move on, they change. I suspect that Sergeant Grillo here probably has more time in Southbury than that entire barracks does there right now. I no longer know anybody there, and that's something that's hard to quantify. You know, these guys know the town, and the troopers, they do their best, believe me, I was one of them. But you can't, you're transferred. People move in, they move out, and that's something that, you know, that really is important in my view. So I support this. It's, as a common phrase is, it's not a question of if, but when, and that's long past. I think it's pretty much when, so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Harrison?
Robert Harrison, Jeremy Swamp Road, Southbury. Little continuation on Jim Bleidner's comments. I worked as a Southbury officer years ago, and I've worked with many state police officers, many resident troopers, and they've all done their best, tried their best. I think they've done a lot of good for the town. I think in the end, though, we have to bear in mind that the state police resident troopers, they have bosses too, and they have people that they have to answer to, and their bosses come from the state police. And the state, I'm not speaking ill of the state police at all. I think they've done the town very well, but in the very end, the state has to look out for the state. And sometimes some of those critical decisions are gonna be based on what's best for the state rather than what's best for the actual local officers. And I think it's time that we do get a chief. I strongly support the creation of an independent department, so that our chief answers to the Southbury residents, not to the state as a whole. And I think if you bring it down to a more local level, there's more accountability, and there'll be more interaction and positive interaction between residents. And when you develop that positive interaction, that's when crimes get solved too. It takes a village. It's not just up to these guys. They need the help of the residents. And the more that we can create and foster an environment that's open, involved, the more things can get done. With that being said, I think when we do go to pick a chief of police, that is going to be one of the most critical events with the creation if this goes forward. And I would strongly urge to seek assistance, not try to just tackle this on a very local level. There's organizations out there that offer their services for free, Connecticut Chiefs of Police Association, International Chiefs of Police Association. There's different services that they can offer and help with that very important decision. So that's all I had to say, and I hope it goes through. Best of luck.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to ask a question or concern, support? If you're in support, or?
Hi, everyone. Emily Gray, Jeremy Swamp Road, Southbury. Had a wonderful time reading through the report that all of you put together. Hats off to each of you. The one thing that I wanted to give some consideration to, especially as sitting in the back here, as we review the sign that says a town that runs on volunteers. I know from my experience serving in this community and meeting so many people, we have a wealth of individuals who live in this town, from head of the state police, retired state police, to FBI officers. There's a vast breadth of knowledge, I think, in this community as we think of looking forward and bringing this to an independent police department, which I too am supportive of, and it sounds like most of the people here in this room are as well, that we consider making sure that we use what we have to the best of our abilities and to help us move forward. So I think if we look at that structure of reporting, of whether it goes to the Board of Selectmen, the First Selectman, or a Police Commission, I don't think we're doing the town its due diligence and justice by just moving it forward to just the Board of Selectmen and the First Selectman, when we could be taking advantage of so much that others have learned and taken from their various roles in community. Having worked with the Emergency Services Committee, the EMS Committee, I can see from sitting in that room, as they're interacting with the ambulances in town and protocol, just how much that they brought to our town through that service. And I think the same could be applied here for a police commission. So I think as you look at that structure and how we should place that going forward, that's the one thing that I would urge your consideration on, is making sure that we stay a town that runs on volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot of people in the room who are taking interest in this subject. I would really like to hear from some others if you feel you're in support or not, or why. Is there anybody else? Yes, sir, please.
How you doing? George Bryce, Timberland Way, Southbury, Connecticut. I come as a 23-year law enforcement officer and 20-plus year resident of Southbury. I can tell you that, from my opinion, the independency of the Southbury Police Department is long, long overdue. From a taxpayer perspective, one of the biggest issues with not having an independent police department is retention issues. The marketplace for people trying to get into law enforcement is very competitive. And people are looking for upward mobility, and they're also looking for good pay. And one of the problems that I've seen through my career with resident trooper towns is that people who are passionate about law enforcement want opportunity. They want opportunity to be detectives. They want opportunity to go up the chain. They want opportunity to become administrators. And one of the downsides of the resident trooper program is it's very limited. It limits you to maybe a first-line supervisor, and that's about it. So a lot of resident trooper towns run into the problem of hiring new officers and spending an incredible amount of money on the buildup of that officer. You're paying them while they're in the academy, so you're getting absolutely no use out of them for the 26-plus weeks that they're in the academy. You're really getting no use out of them for the weeks that they're in FTO because they're attached to another officer. You still have to hire for the overtime to cover any shifts that are there. And then once they get through FTO, they become certified, they then start to look to other agencies that have more to offer, more opportunities. So one of the things that I think would be really beneficial to the town with going independent is the ability to retain officers, because I know there's been a lot of bleed out from officers getting hired with us, getting certified, and then going to other agencies. The other issue that I think is important is making sure that we do build a solid foundation. It's an excellent idea to go independent. I think, again, like I said, it's long overdue, but one of the things we want to make sure of, both in choice of chief and in choice of how that reporting function goes, is to make sure that we're on a path towards both state and or federal accreditation through CALIA, making sure that we are starting to build policies that are in compliance with today's trends. And I think one of the other things that's good about having a police commission, I come from an agency that has a police commission that has its own issues with having a police commission. But from a public perspective, there is, I think, a benefit to having another board that has a mix of both parties, that has some level of oversight into what the agency is doing, how it connects with its community. And the only thing that I would caution against is to make sure that if we do go independent and we do have a police commission or some other kind of board that they answer to, that the operational policies of the department are governed by the chief. I can tell you from the agency that I'm a part of, one of the issues is that in our town charter, the police commission is the sole authority to make policy. And that becomes kind of an issue when you're looking at trying to deal with things like the Police Accountability Act or making on-the-fly changes that come from post. So I'm a big fan of saying there should be standard operating procedures that go through the chief, and then there's other things that are more town-oriented, like dress code, how the department is going to function within the community that goes through a police commission. But I think we would be a bit remiss to not consider that option of having a commission, because I think it does give you that next layer of connection with the members of the public, and where they have more integration with having a feel like they have a say in what's going on with the public safety in their community. But all in all, I think you guys are long overdue for it.
So I would like to address, Chris, we became Tier 1 certified. Our police department has, and we are working towards Tier 2 as we speak. And kudos to our department that they were really able to document that so a lot sooner, frankly, than I had ever thought. And my hat's off to the PD. Chris took that upon themselves and honestly had it halfway home before I really knew. So yes, I mean, not that organizing or not organizing, but I'll always be proud of this department and the professionalism that they've been acting, I will say that publicly, to get ourselves accredited. And as far as the retention goes, we understand the retention issues, but I will also say that we've been able to attract a lot of certified officers that have decided they want to come to work for Southbury. And one of my questions I ask every officer, you understand we're not organized. Is that an issue for you? And they've, so far, none of us said it's been an issue for them to come to work. So I think you're right, certainly right to many of what you have said. But it's also, as a police officer, you also know it's about the management.
Sure.
And who's managing the department and how the officers feels towards that management.
Absolutely.
And I think that's made a difference in, we seem to be doing okay with getting our officers. But
Excellent. So that's all I got. So hope
Thank
you guys
you.
get it.
Thanks, George.
would anybody else like to?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, you can, sure, sure, no problem.
We're talking about all the benefits, which is wonderful. What are the negatives? Is there a structure here to talk about all the wonderful things that are gonna happen? But if we do this, what would be the negative impact, if any? It's just, thank you.
So what we looked at was, is there going to be a financial problem? We needed to document what the question is financially to the taxpayers. And I have said this from the beginning, even if something is more expensive for the town, is it not the right thing to do for the quality of life? It's not always about the dollars and cents, but we do have to know that. One of my big questions was, for me, the concern was, is our facility big enough? And if we build out with more officers, can the facility handle that many officers? We hired a professional, an architect, who came in and reviewed it and said it was big enough. Because if you were to have to build a police station, it's expensive. That doesn't mean, it doesn't mean we wouldn't do it, but a plan would have to be in place to know what the future would bring. And right now, what we're seeing is our police department is big enough. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was just that we're talking about the positives, which is, great, but we haven't really spoken about the negative. And I wasn't even thinking finances, I was just thinking the overall.
John?
A part of the report is this matrix that is laid out advantages and disadvantages of the resident trooper program and the advantages and disadvantages of the independent force.
Would you like that put on
No.
the screen?
The point I tried, I don't think it's for any one of us to create an overall judgment about what our opinion is, rather where the balance is. I think, though, that all the issues, plus and minus, are laid out here. I have a personal opinion about it, but I think it's up for the people here to understand that. If you really want us to offer our opinion, I think we will, but it's all laid out here, everything that we could find that was a plus and a minus on either side.
So I think the purpose of this group to study was not to come up with an opinion, but present the facts to the Board of Selectmen and the public of what they found in there. We were purposely, in the Board of Selectmen, we did not want an opinion or a recommendation. It would be up to the citizens of Southbury, but we would have the pros and cons, the analysis of expenses, because taxes are always a concern. And the analysis they have shown are in the report. Yes, ma'am. Would you like, sir? Sure.
Good evening. I hadn't planned on speaking, but there's a lot of discussion.
Well, thanks for coming up.
And I had some questions. I read the reports, which were very thorough and sort of clear, especially the point about Southbury being the largest town that didn't have an independent police force. By the way, my name's Hugh Tansey. I'm over on Coughlin Drive. Two questions. One that none of the documents seem to answer for me was, currently it looked like trooper retention would be improved. And I was wondering, because it seemed like the pay was going to be that there wasn't really big pay increases in a new system, but there would be presumed better progression, although it seemed like there was only a couple of real progression steps in the structure. So So that was sort of one question, as well as, you know, what, is there something that would also foster closer ties between the troopers and the constituents in town with a you know, a system that's our own independent force? The other question I had is, I'm a little bit unsure of crime rates. There's a lot of hearsay in town. You feel like it's increasing, and you can see sort of things going on, retail crime, break-ins in cars, break-ins in houses. So yeah, with the new system, that's our system, you know, what's the process for the, either the troopers or the Board of Selectmen to determine how to improve the safety of the town with the new system?
So Chris can probably speak to this more than I can, but what the committee did when we were looking at this, one of the things we found out, if we choose to go independent, is it opens up opportunities to do mutual aid with other towns. So our officers would be given the opportunity to be on a SWAT team, which would be a SWAT team with Middlebury and Roxbury and all the other independent towns in the area. So that would open up a larger amount of opportunities for our officers to do other things that they might be interested in, whereas under the resident trooper program, we don't have that ability.
Yeah, no, that is well said. Currently, we receive some services through the Connecticut State Police, such as emergency services, you know, also known as a SWAT team, accident reconstruction for any major accidents, fatal motor vehicle accidents. We receive support through them. If we did leave the program, we would no longer have we would still have access to some of those services, but more likely through state statute, through mutual aid agreements with other towns, regional SWAT, regional emergency service task force, regional accident reconstruction task force. So officers may not have, you know, it's a small department. There is always going to be limited movement within the department, and that's any small department. That's just not Southbury. But you do have the opportunity when you do organize to allow those officers then to go to different regional task force to give them more opportunities. As far as the crime rates, right now the state is currently responsible for reporting the crime rates overall. So you can go online, and I believe it's on the State of Connecticut website, the crime rates for Southbury. So those are published right online through the state. As far as an independent police department, if we were organized, then the town of Southbury would be responsible for publishing those stats to the feds, and they would be published probably on the town website too, because it would be a town stat.
Go ahead, sure.
As far as the increase in crime, it is not hearsay, okay? It has happened almost every store, and not to scare anyone, but I believe if you're aware, of your surroundings, then you know what to look out for. And it has increased. I think the Police Accountability Act or whatever limits you. Is that something that will stay in place until the next change in government or whatever? Because right now, as much as you want to do something, you can't. You can't follow someone if they're doing something wrong. I was told in our store, someone's walking around and you're suspicious, you cannot follow them around, because they'll come back at you and sue you for following them around if they are of another race or something. That's crazy. There's right and there's wrong, and there's stealing. And I know every store has, I didn't know about the bank. That was news to me, because that's my bank. That's even scarier. But I think people need to be made aware, without frightening them, okay, that things have gotten really bad. And I just see that. So is that something that can ever change, or do we have to wait till someone changes it, you know, way higher up, or another form of government or something?
Well, I can
And
tell
I don't
you-
want to get political, but
No.
it is what it is. And
Yeah.
it's not anything you can do, I mean, with it. It's sad, because, you know, you're going to tell me, like in my store, if I see someone who's acting suspicious, I can't keep an eye out for them?
Yeah. No, and that's a great question. We have people in government that are continuously fighting to change some of those things in the Police Accountability Bill, that are very supportive of making some changes. However, as the police, we can't wait for the change. So we work with it. You know, we accept that that was the bill that was passed, and we work within it. So we can't pursue people or investigate cases in the manner that we used to. We find new ways to do it because that's what we're faced with. So, you know, we work with the businesses, and, you know, we've been working a lot with the plaza because the plaza's had a lot of retail theft. So we work with them on things that we can do to help safeguard. And again, like, you know, it was said here today, it's not just the police. We very much rely on the community to solve these crimes and to make the community safer. You know, we work with the plaza on, you know, increasing surveillance up there to help us with our investigations.
And I've seen that, which is
We work
great.
with, you know, the retail stores of hiring private security, the times that, you know, we'll provide them with stats saying, look, over the last 6 months, the retail stores in Southbury have been hit between this time and this time on these days. It's probably a good time to schedule private security because the cost of hiring the private security is outweighing the loss that you're getting. You know, we work with them on better communication with the managers at the stores, what they can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do. We never want anybody to put themselves in harm's
No,
way.
I agree.
You know, over property. So we've been working with the community to try and reduce these thefts within the confines of what we had, so.
Yeah. I
you
just
know,
want everyone to be aware, within the last 2.5 years, it's just, in my opinion, and I know, didn't know about the bank, but I know it has just increased so much that it's really frightening. And coming from a state that's not, or a city, I grew up in Jersey City where it was horrible in terms of crime, it still is basically. I moved here from Roxbury, and it was like, it's a beautiful town. And I don't want to see that go away. I want to still be able to walk out on that street and not worry about it. I want people to come into my store and be happy and not afraid or not worried or anything like that. We worked hard to get that store to where it is. And, you know, having people tell me, oh, so what, you know, you have insurance, whatever. And it doesn't even make any sense, but they're just ignorant people, I guess. But it's just so that everybody's aware. Major, major change, and I'm sure it's because of that. I know New York is going to now take it from $1,000 that you could go in and take whatever merchandise you want to $2,000, which is completely, I mean, we'll lose our store. My son will lose the store. My husband will all lose those 2 stores. And it's going to come to a point where if I don't feel it's safe enough, we're going to lose them anyway, because I don't want to lose my son or my husband. And that can happen really easily, okay? It can go from just a robbery to something ugly. And I don't want that to ever happen. So I just hope everybody doesn't think it's just hearsay. It's a lot more than that. It's been happening. Sorry.
Thank you. So there's some questions that were emailed to me. If you'll bear with me, is that okay? One of the questions, please provide more information as to what type of grant Southbury is unable to access because of the presence of a resident trooper. That's one. Could you explain that?
Specifically what grants are available right now, I can't speak to, but I can say that being in the resident trooper program, the town is not eligible for a lot of grants that we would be normally as an organized police department.
But there are grants. I do know there's grants. I don't know the specific grants, but if you could find that for me so we could answer that question on the specific grants.
Yeah, and I think Chief Colin McAllister, who was an advisory to the committee, spoke about it probably in more depth. And, you know, one example he gave was recently he received at the Naugatuck Police Department was a first-year officer grant where it paid a good portion, or if not all, the salary of the officer for the first year through a grant that, you know, the town of Southbury would have been eligible for if it was organized. So he's not available currently at the moment, but he's a great resource to the committee that, you know, I'm sure we can get all that information from.
So let me also ask, I think right now if there is a drug bust or a seizure of property in Southbury, we do not get that vehicle or that money. There's some money that if it's a drug seizure, and we have made, frankly, we have made some significant arrests in that area. We would be, that money would stay with Southbury should that be our operation, which it generally is.
Right, so currently under the program, the asset forfeitures would go to the state, currently.
But under under a organized department, the forfeitures will go to the town.
Correct.
Okay. And the next question was, how significant are these grants in maintaining the safety of Southbury residents? I don't know if you can quantify those grants in maintaining safety, except that it would be offsetting costs of operations of the police department.
Right, and there's grants there's DWI grants for, they'll cover salaries, overtime for setting up DWI checkpoints. There's grants for equipment, speed trailers, radar equipment, that is used to enhance, the safety of the roads. There's grants for computer-related investigations, for computer crimes, child predators. And again, there's a benefit to any time that you receive, grant money, obviously.
But at this time, without being organized, we can't partake, we have difficulty taking part of those grants.
Correct.
Another question was, what measures will be taken to educate a selectman or board of selectmen in law enforcement practices and supervision of a chief of police? That's an interesting thing, because in fact, I am technically the designated chief of police, which doesn't mean a lot. But I would say that we generally leave the law enforcement practices to the professionals. I don't think there's any board member who would try to think past our professionals, which is a resident trooper, a chief of police, a sergeant who's been in the department longer than I've been in office. So I don't know if, in my opinion, that we would need to be educated in police work. You would be hiring a chief who is educated in a background in police work. Would you say that's?
I think there's some part of, currently there's some part of education. Anytime we come to some type of issue, we have to educate each other. Not only from a police educating the Board of Selectmen or the First Selectmen, but the First Selectmen, Board of Selectmen educating the police department as well on how things run. I think it's a relationship that's kind of like symbiotic already, and I don't think that would change at all if there was a police chief.
Yeah, I was educated. I was told not to show up at the crime scene because you could be called in to testify for the entire trial, so don't come by, Jeff. So you do get educated as you come into office about that. The question, will the residents of Southbury be allowed to vote on this decision? Or is the forum on the 28th be the only opportunity to have concerns heard? We will be having another forum, July 10th is scheduled, to bring up any other concerns. The question is up to the Board of Selectmen to determine if the question should be on the referendum. In November, when we have our elections, and that's why we're trying to have these meetings as quick as possible to hear from and educate the public. It will be the selectmen already said, the whole board said, we will be putting a question, if we determine it should be on the referendum, and the question in November. Jason?
I'll just add that our town's a little unique as to the other towns we looked at, like Ledyard, Montville, whatnot. Their city councils or selectmen passed ordinances and created police departments. Our charter requires a referendum if we're going to change the manner of police services in the town. So if we are going to, if the town did want to do this, it's not something the Board of Selectmen has authority to do. It would go to the voters at some point. Likely, we've been talking about a November timeframe. So.
If the town finds the change unsatisfactory, can the resident state trooper model be reinstated? I don't think that's a realistic thing to reinstate. If you should decide to make the change to go back, I don't think Is it impossible? No, I don't think it's impossible. You can vote to go back to the resident trooper program. As our charter, we can change the way we do our police work. It can be done. Highly unlikely that it would be changed. What else did I have here? This gentleman here.
Tim O'Neill, 1113 Roxbury Road. I just wanted to thank the committee for the hard work that they did, and also the Southbury Police for their exemplary service to the town. The one question I have, and I think it was answered, there isn't a staffing analysis that was done, and I think that needs to be done to find out what the optimal amount of officers that are needed for the town, and I think that has to correlate with retention and people that are either retiring or moving to another force. And then what is forecasted for the amount of officers that are going to be required if we do go to an independent force? That's all.
I believe there was an analysis in that report.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess a simple way to explain it would be the needs of the town are not going to be different today as they are if we organize tomorrow. So the needs of the town would still be the same, and the number of police officers required to sufficiently police the town and provide a good service is dictated by the needs of the town. And that's the one thing that's the constant. The town's needs are not going to change immediately. They may change over time. There may be more needs, there may be less needs, but that's one thing that's going to be more of a constant. So the number of police personnel needed is going to remain the same as.
The one thing I heard was it was based on what we're budgeting for, and in my opinion, I don't think that should be based on a budget. It should be based on the needs of the town and what the retention is where officers are going.
Go ahead,
It's probably
Jason.
more of a budgeting question.
Budgeting question. So
That's and John Michaels could probably speak to it more. That's a discussion that's had every year at budget season as to what the needs of the town are and what the staffing level of the police department should be. And the police come in, there's some years the police department come in and ask for more police officers. There's some years the police department comes in and doesn't ask for more police officers. There's some years where the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance say yes. There's some years we say no. There's some years where we, give some but not all. And that's all based on lengthy discussions and analysis of the needs of the town at that moment. And like Chris said, the needs of the town change. So it's something that's evaluated on a yearly basis, primarily at the starting point with the police budget, with their requests to the first selectman, like all the other departments, as to what they say they need that year. And then once it's identified as a need, then that need is fully evaluated and vetted and determined whether that's something that needs to go there. So I don't think the budget number is just some made-up number. It's based on that sort of analysis and discussion year over year.
Dan, do you have something?
Yeah, and a good example is, Jason, is this year. When we went to budget, the police came and said they needed the 25th officer added due to the constraints or the needs to the police accountability bill, and we reviewed that and looked at it, and we added the 25th officer this year. So I can only speak for the last 4.5 years I've been here, but every year during the budget cycle, the police do come in and they do an analysis of crime statistics and everything else to determine the needs of the department. So that's kind of how we base the number. It's not based just upon a number based on a budget, it's based upon their needs.
There's also been, at times, there's questions where if you add it into the budget for another 2 or 3 officers, is it reasonable to expect, everybody thinks we can just go out and just select another officer. It's very difficult to get good officers. And you could have a number in the budget that's higher. The question is, are you going to be able to hire that officer? Are you going to be able to get to that number? Is it possible during the year to interview and come up with that many? There also comes with what I've tried to do. When I got into office, there was only 17 officers. How do you structure a police department? You could have in that budget, there was a larger number, I forget, 21 or 22 in the budget at the time. And I was asked if you can go just out and get X number of officers. It's politically difficult to say, stop, pause, let's wait, let's hire 2 or 3 in the pool of applicants that we have that are good. Get them onboarded, get them into the PD, let them integrate with all the officers that are there. My argument was if you get 6 or 8, let's say you had room for 8 and you hired 8 brand-new officers, put them into the department, they go to the academy. Chris, I'm sure you're still friends with guys, girls that you went to the academy with, and they bond and create a clique. And I just recently had a discussion with someone who said that caused a problem in another municipality that had to be cleaned up. So you can put numbers into the budget, but you have to know you're gonna be able to, you're not gonna be short of filling that number, or that you're gonna be able, have the ability to structure it. As I say to Chris, we're not gonna bottom fish just to put a number, someone in place. We're gonna pick from the best we can with a pool of applicants, and I think it's worked pretty well the way we've been doing it. It took some time.
If I might, I'd like to answer the question. We're all going to answer it just a little bit differently. In Southbury, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen asked every department to develop a budget on a 0 base. That's 1. 2, we ask every department to tell us, what do you need to run your department effectively? What do you need to run your department effectively? We don't start with the budget. We start with the needs of the town as the departments see it. Those requests come to the Board of Selectmen, and then, like Jason says, they do an evaluation, comes to the Board of Finance, agree and disagree, and we end up with a budget. So it's not the budget that determines the number of police officers in the town. It's the needs that the department tells us they need. And,
Okay. Ken?
Hi, it's me again. What scared me in the prior conversation was training officers to be on tactical SWAT teams. I haven't heard any, came up, he mentioned it. Okay? I haven't seen anything in town that requires, that we would require a SWAT team. If you can't chase anybody in a car, what are you gonna do with guys with guns? I'm a combat veteran. I've been shot at and I've been hit, okay? You don't wanna go into that. So I discourage that. It's admirable, and if somebody does elect and we decide to do that, it's not my decision. But who's gonna pay for the training? And if they are deployed to another town, who's gonna pay for them when they go to another town? I know what we do now, it's supposed to be kept track of and you get reimbursed from the other town. But, you know, that's all these things that gotta be put into place. So I discourage the notion of SWAT teams because I've been in machine gun fights and it ain't fun. You know, and fun is not the right word, it's scary. And, you know, do we want gunslingers out there? I worked in New York City, and there was a SWAT team, and the guys were walking around, they're looking at the chicks, you know? That's not a SWAT team to me. It's scary, you know? I'm telling you the truth, you know? You want a very competent police officer who can handle situations when they come up, and maybe not get to the point where you need a SWAT team. I don't know if you agree with that.
So I can tell you.
Ken, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. My comment was made to, as we spoke about opportunities that would be provided to our officers. You know, the recommendation wasn't to go out and form a SWAT team, that's for sure. But it is to, there are going to be other opportunities, such as an emergency services SWAT team that might be available to our officers and things like that. That was what and I'm sorry I didn't clarify it clearly, but that's what I meant by that comment.
Yeah, I don't think we want gunslingers.
So I can also answer.
I am one.
I can also say to the public that there have been instances in Southbury where we've had to call in, and it was the state police who came in with their team of people for incidences which required that specialty. I'm not going
That's
to
okay
elaborate.
with me. The state police have trained officers in that area. But for us to invest in that in our officers, if you very likely are not going to deploy them, they're going to get frustrated and then move to another town, I think. It provides, there's a risk in that, too.
So Chris, if you can explain how that would work with operative with other departments.
Yeah, it's similar to an accident reconstruction team. I agree, Southbury does not need a full-time SWAT team. We don't have a lot of major incidents that require some type of emergency services unit. However, there have been occasions in Southbury where we did need them, barricaded subjects, situations where that you need that specialized training, you need that specialized equipment to make sure that everybody is safe. And the laws are changing now on how we handle certain situations. We definitely use emergency services as a last approach, but sometimes they're a necessity. And right now, we get that service through the state police. If we leave the state police, we still will get some services from them, which we get, that any other town gets. But if we did organize, it would give guys an opportunity to join a regional emergency service team, a regional accident reconstruction team. What that does is it allows the town to still have those services, but not pay the full amount, not have a SWAT team that we don't have a need for. We don't have a need for a full-time accident reconstruction team, but having one or two officers that are trained in, advanced accident reconstruction that can then, work with other officers from other departments, that cost is then deferred. So instead of the town of Southbury assuming all the cost of buying all the accident, equipment, they participate in the program, and that cost deferred for the accident reconstruction equipment. If you have two officers that are trained in it, for a small department of 25, is a good number. But if one of those officers is on vacation, it leaves one officer that can't do the investigation by himself. So you now get the advantage of manpower through the interoperability. There's state statute that defines the interoperability and mutual aid agreements, and in the statute, it establishes who's responsible for liability and payment. So those things are already spelled out. But, I agree with you. We don't want to, put guys in flak jackets and ballistic helmets. I mean, that's not what Southbury is. Southbury is a community-based, police department, and we want to remain that way.
So it should be much like we do mutual aid for the fire department. If we go to, let's say we went to Newtown to help with a fire, we're not sending Newtown a bill for the use of our equipment, but during the day, maybe we're short on trucks and fire department, so Middlebury may come over, Woodbury may come over, depends on, or Oxford may come. This would be a similar situation where if there was a call for an accident reconstruction, a major accident, the team, if we had someone was out on vacation, or it wasn't their day, the day which they're working, but another officer and another that had trained with them was on, they would come in and help with the accident reconstruction, and they would be qualified to be part of the accident reconstruction, qualified to do that. And that's where the mutual aid comes in, and that way you're not reinventing all these teams, because I don't think you can effectively do that. You couldn't, and the state police can do that because they send their team for training, they send them to special. And if it comes to major crime, when major crime is called, most of the time major crime from the state police take over if it's a big enough incident. Is that correct?
Well, if it is a major incident, the response a lot of times is going to be determined by the state's attorney's office or the attorney general's office if it's an officer-involved shooting. So even with departments that are organized, sometimes the state does come in and work the investigations.
Okay. Is
So-
there anybody else?
So Jeff, I have about 7 questions that were presented to us by Michael Carrington, who's a member of the Strategic Plan Commission. So I can go through them quickly, and
Sure.
the members of the committee can answer them. So the first one is impacts to, and this is not in the order that Mr. Carrington submitted them, so sorry, Michael, if I mess them up, but I think I have them right. Impacts to policing operations beyond Southbury. Our primary concern is obviously operations with the town of Southbury. However, it's not unreasonable to consider what impacts an independent police force will have beyond Southbury. Do you anticipate any additional delays, problems on Interstate 84 with car and truck accident responses, accidents, issues in surrounding towns, etc.? Can you discuss more about the mutual aid teams and the availability of additional resources if needed from the state?
I think the mutual aid we just covered on the last question. As far as 84, the state police are currently responsible for our limited access highways, 84 running through Southbury. They still would be responsible for that. In addition to 84, the state-owned properties in Southbury, the state would also still be responsible for. Example, Southbury Training School, Salford Falls State Park, Kettletown State Park, they would still be responsible for those areas. Currently, if there's an incident in one of the state parks, Department of Environmental Energy and Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, they added an extra E in there a couple of years ago. Will come out, they'll do the investigations. If it's on one of the lakes, if it's a boating accident, DEEP will come out and investigate the boating accident. So that wouldn't change as an organized department either. And that's the same for any municipality that has a state highway through it. The local state roads like Main Street North that runs from Oxford to Woodbury, although a state road, we'd still be responsible for it as a town. We're responsible for it now as the town police, and we continue that.
So impacts to policing operations within Southbury. The committee outlined that policing services should not be impacted by an independent police force, but I'd like more elaboration on that at the upcoming town forum. Setting aside the cost or administration, I think 99% of residents just want to know that if they need to dial 911, they'll still get the same excellent and reliable police services. I see no reason why this will change, but I would love for that to be clarified. And I think sorry, Chris, I think I could say, we run our own dispatch. So if you dial 911, you get the dispatch in our police department. So I don't think that would change considerably at all, or at all.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. The town of Southbury is its own PSAP, so we receive all the 911 calls for the town of Southbury. The needs of the town will not change dramatically unless it's, over a period of time. It could, like I said. And the police department isn't changing. So you're going to have the same officers responding to the same calls. So the quality of service is going to remain the same. And you have the same dispatch, you have the same 911. None of that is changing. We already do it now. So there's essentially no change in the service.
Right, and the next one is about grants, but I think we've already touched on the grants, so I'll go to the next one. Liability insurance. The committee noted that there will be no change in insurance costs by going independent, but I wasn't sure if that meant health insurance, benefits, or liability insurance. In terms of liability insurance, how are the Southbury Police Department and its officers currently insured potentially negligent acts? Does anything proceed through the state? Will the insurance market or premiums be impacted by the change of the independent police force designation? I simply want to make sure that the town, the Southbury Police Department, and the individual officers are fully protected, and I wasn't sure if there was any benefit that respect to remaining the resident state trooper program. My concern is that one catastrophic claim can significantly impact insurance premiums and can even lead to being dropped from the insurance carrier. In that respect, I would be potentially better if we were risk pooled with a larger entity, e.g. the state of Connecticut. Could we be risk pooled with other town police departments? I'm not sure that I fully understand our current situation, but I'd like to be better educated and informed about how things presently work and how they would not change with an independent police force. So from an insurance standpoint, we reached out to our broker, Scott Sundberg at HD Seeger, and currently we provide the insurance, and also our officers get it, but the liability insurance runs through the town, but they also get it from the union as well. Our insurance costs would not go up based upon our conversations with HD Seeger by going independent, and would not be affected in any ways whatsoever. I don't think with the union, Chris, and maybe you could speak to that, it would change as well.
Yeah, there'd be no change in the union. Currently, through the union, all the police officers receive criminal, civil, and administrative liability coverage at no extra cost other than the union payments.
And we talked about the ordinances, so I don't know if we should touch on that one. Oversight model, I think we've had some public comment on that, and I think they were all great. I think that's something that the board will have to consider. And the other one was other pre-referendum agreements. Similarly, might the first selectman's office, town of Southbury, negotiate agreements in advance of the referendum with actual costs and details of vehicle impounds, prisoner retention, et cetera? I'm curious if the regional mutual aid teams agreements or special services from the state would be negotiated ahead of time, or if that's not considered a major obstacle. Again, this may not be possible in terms of procedure, but my thinking is that voters should have the most complete picture possible ahead of the referendum. So I don't know if we would negotiate any of these terms before the referendum. I think we would, as, currently, until the referendum was still under the resident trooper program, we would still remain if it didn't pass in a referendum. So I don't know, Jason, if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, personally, and I'm interested what Sergeant Grillo thinks, I would think that if we were to form an independent department and we were to hire a police chief, we're probably going to want the police chief involved in what these mutual aid agreements might be, and involved in that process. So that would be, in my mind, a post-referendum topic.
I would say it would be a post-referendum topic. First, we have to decide if the citizens of Southbury want to have an organized police department. And then secondly, once that's established, that decision is made. If it's made to organize, then we would start the whole process of, that will kick in after that, of how it would be, or what you would look for in a chief, and we'd involve a lot more. That's a much deeper look forward than determining whether we should organize or not. Anything else, Dan?
No, I think that covered the majority of his questions.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience? Now that we've talked about a few things and a few things more, anybody would like to speak in favor of or against, or a question?
Cindy Harrison, Jeremy Swamp Road. So I was hoping somebody would get to these questions, but they didn't. They're a little more on the financial analysis side, very thorough. I went through it and I tried to, take every comment or every detail and see if I could find a place that it went. My question is, I read the architect report and they listed about a half a dozen different things that they felt were a little deficient. And I didn't, and the report says that the building is adequate. But I didn't see, and I'd be happy to find out it was addressed, that the costs of those deficiencies were addressed anywhere in the financial analysis. Or were you feeling that they weren't necessary to be addressed? I didn't find them.
That's a really good point, Cindy. We didn't address them in the analysis only because that wasn't really the scope of what we were going to do, because the architect said to go independent, the department, that building is sufficient. But those two items, one was the cells and the other was the wall in the lobby, that we did address in the budget process this year. So we are going to, did earmark some funding to correct those issues. And we do that, I believe, in speaking to John, whether we went independent or not, we'd have to do at least the wall in the lobby. Not necessarily the cells, but the wall in the lobby we definitely would have to do.
So just for maybe, other people to know, it might be good to know that those deficiencies were already addressed so that people know that. And what would be your intent about the other deficiencies? Is it something that we feel we can mitigate another way? Is it something that we feel in the future we have to do?
John?
If I might, Cindy, we were laser focused on giving a report that talked about the differences between organized and not organized. And I'm afraid I have been one of the ones who kept saying, look, if the building is adequate and these deficiencies exist whether we're organized or not, They have nothing to do with this report. If we want to step back and talk about, are they deficiencies that the Board of Selectmen, on a recommendation from the Police Department, suggests that come through the process, happy to address them. If I remember, I think there was a maximum $50,000 to fix the wall thing as a ballpark estimate from the architect, and a back-of-the-envelope estimate written in lemon juice that only certain people could see and would disappear later, and he wasn't going to opine that it was correct. It might cost up to $100,000 per cell to make the 3 jail cells meet best practice standard. But again, he said, it's adequate the way it is. As to whether you go independent or not has nothing to do with that decision. Is that an answer?
No,
that works?
and thank you for that.
Okay.
I was looking, to find an answer. I mean, he presented a deficiency, so it's, potentially a future cost then, is what we could say. As far as reporting, and I've listened to people, this way or that way, and whether it should be the first selectman or the Board of Selectmen or a police commission, and maybe we haven't thought about a blend. I do know out there that there's other departments where they provide a blend. The day-to-day operations, are right here, but some of your policies and getting deep into personnel and all of that is handled by a commission. So I'm just throwing that out there that, there are other models. It doesn't have to be an either or. So, and would like to also say that this first chief is critical, and would really say, we have a lot of resources in town, whether it's volunteers and people who understand those sorts of needs. So would very much encourage you to reach out to the sources that we do have. Final question I have, and I don't know if we considered that financially. If we cancel the contract with the state, is there any kind of a penalty? Is there a prorate to it? Are we paying, just monthly, or something was that considered?
It's in the report.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe.
I could have missed it.
I believe, and I'll double check it, Cindy, I'll get back to you, but I believe with the resident trooper program, it's a 30-day out for us. But as we looked at this, and if we do choose to go that route, there's gonna be overlap. So we're gonna have to have
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
resident trooper and the chief in that, in most instances, I believe, was at least 4 months.
Okay.
So there will be an overlap for that, so there will be a cost associated with.
And that
with
was
as
in
well.
the.
That's in the
There's
financial.
some of the, I could have missed it, It was.
Absolutely.
That's in the
I went item by
financial.
item, so I could have missed some of it.
That's in the financial analysis.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
it could have been something I missed.
Yeah, and I
so.
will find out for sure, and I'll let you know, or I'll let everyone know the exact, I believe it was a 30-day out when we looked at the resident trooper contract, though.
Yeah, it is a 30-day out, but depending on what the overlap, what the needs of the new chief may be, if you were to have a chief, they will give you a recommendation of what they think is needed. We have a lot of very seasoned officers, sergeants, that are very capable. It may be a 30-day, but it could be, I wouldn't anticipate 60.
For example, I believe Montville was longer than 30 days or 4
Right.
months. And they were the last one to
But that
convert
was
over.
figured into the financial analysis.
Perfect. So, good job. Thanks for the work you did. Be applauded for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? I see a young lady over there is getting tired. Anybody else? Okay, I think motion to adjourn. Seconded, all in favor? Signify by saying aye. Aye, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.